I shouldn't have bought the apartment, that much is clear now. But when you're 26, fresh out of a long-term breakup, chasing a job in a city you barely know, decisions that seem smart in the moment become regrets with long shadows. It started with an email. Gutman Properties welcomes you to Oak Ridge Apartments, Unit 2B. Your keys will be under the mat. Please review the attached rules addendum before moving in. I didn't question it. I'd signed the lease 2 weeks earlier from my laptop in a noisy Baton Rouge cafe, half distracted by my second coffee and the idea of finally living alone for the first time in my life. The photos had looked fine, dated but clean. The price was almost unreasonably low for an apartment just outside New Orleans. Something they chalked up to long-term vacancy and minor structural quirks. When you're broke and optimistic, words like that don't set off alarms. They feel manageable. The place sat at the end of a long gravel road, shaded by old live oaks and box elders dripping with moss. The air was heavy in a way I didn't expect. Less like weather and more like a weight. Oak Ridge was a semicircle of 6 units in what looked like a converted plantation guest house. Stucco walls, sagging shutters, a little too quiet. Just as the email said, the keys were under the mat. Brass ones. Too ornate for a rental property. Cold to the touch despite the 90-degree heat. The door creaked open with surprising ease. And for the first 5 minutes, I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd gotten lucky. The place was bigger than expected. Vaulted ceilings with exposed beams, hardwood floors scratched by time, and sunlight pouring in through warped glass windows. A big fireplace sat like a mouth on the far wall. The mantel above it adorned with dusty plaster cherubs. The place smelled like lavender, dust, and something vaguely metallic. Not bad, just different. I dropped my backpack and suitcase on the floor and did the usual move-in dance. Open drawers, test the faucet, flush the toilet, stare at myself in the old bathroom mirror, like maybe I'd catch some version of myself blinking back. Then I remembered the rules. I pulled out my phone and opened the email attachment. The PDF labeled simply, Rules for Unit 2B, Oak Ridge Apartments. There were 6 of them, laid out in a stern, serif font. No letterhead, just rules. 1. Between the hours of 2 a.m. and 3 a.m., do not leave your bedroom. Do not attempt to look into the hallway. If you hear a knock, ignore it. 2. The fireplace is never to be used. Even if the flue appears functional, do not remove the iron grate. 3. Every Friday at sunset, place 1 teaspoon of salt and one slice of white bread on the kitchen windowsill. Dispose of the remains Saturday morning. Use gloves. 4. If the lights flicker between 7:45 p.m. and 8 p.m., do not attempt to fix the breaker. Lock the bathroom door and wait precisely 15 minutes. 5. On the night of a full moon, you may hear singing outside the bedroom window. Do not respond, regardless of what the voice says or how familiar it may seem. 6. There is a crawl space in the bedroom closet. It is not for storage. Never open the door after dark. Never reach inside for any reason. I blinked at the screen. Scrolled up, scrolled down. Was it a joke? Some weird, dusty prank left in the lease to spook new tenants? It read like bad fan fiction. Rules for surviving the haunted Airbnb. But there was no winking, no smiley face, not even a disclaimer. Just bare instructions, repeated in bold beneath. Failure to comply forfeits your security deposit and, if applicable, your life and memory. I smiled. Someone had a flair for drama. And yet, I didn't delete it. Instead, I screenshotted the file, saved it to my lock screen, and told myself I'd ask the landlord about it later, or the property manager, or whoever was supposed to be keeping up with this strange little building that seemed frozen in amber. But the longer I stayed that first day, the less funny it felt. The light in the living room dimmed unnaturally around 7:47 p.m. Just as I was fiddling with the cheap blinds, the overhead bulb blinked once, twice, then went dead. The lamp in the bedroom turned itself off with a soft click. Even the hallway, where no light even was, looked darker than it had 20 minutes earlier. I checked my watch. 7:49. The email came back to mind so fast, it was as if someone whispered it in my ear. If the lights flicker between 7:45 and 8, do not attempt to fix the breaker. Lock the bathroom door and wait precisely 15 minutes. I stood frozen in the kitchenette, heart thudding louder than I wanted to admit. This is silly, I told myself. You're standing in a charming, if weird-smelling, apartment in Louisiana, not the Conjuring house. Rules don't mean anything unless you believe in them. But I couldn't shake the cold crawling up my palms. I walked quickly down the short hallway, opened the bathroom door, and stepped inside. I didn't lock it right away. Instead, I stood in the darkness, listening. The kind of listening that reaches beyond sound, feeling more than hearing. Silence. Then the bulb above the mirror flickered once, weak as a breath, and died. I locked the door. I didn't move, didn't sit, just stood there, counting seconds in my head like I used to during childhood games of hide and seek. The air in the bathroom felt too thick, the smell of mildew much stronger than it had been earlier. Then, at exactly 8 minutes in, Something knocked on the bathroom door. Just once. Soft. Polite. Like someone afraid of being rude. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Then again. Knock. Then a third. "Just checking everything's working properly," said a voice. It was cheerful, crisp, male, maybe 30-something, with the friendly cadence of a customer service representative. "I won't come in if you're not decent, I promise." I wanted to say something. "Who are you? How'd you get in?" But I didn't trust my voice not to tremble. The handle turned once, slowly, then stopped. A pause. Locked. That's good. Not many of them remember that part. The voice faded like fog burning away under sun. By minute 15, the light resumed in a pop. The mirror bulb buzzed to life. Outside, the overhead in the hallway clicked back on. When I opened the door, everything was as I'd left it. Except the salt shaker was tipped over on the kitchen counter. The lid missing. Strange, but hardly terrifying. Still, I skipped dinner. I hung a small wooden cross I'd stolen from my mother's attic on the closet knob and pretended not to notice the crawl space above it. The one I'd been instructed never to open after dark. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because anything else happened, but because nothing did. Because the apartment kept its silence like a secret held too long. Because the wind didn't move outside even once. And because I felt watched. Not by human eyes exactly, but by some darker curiosity embedded in the walls, waiting to see if I'd follow the rules. Morning brought reassurance, and eggs, and coffee, and a bright sunshine that made the hardwood floors glow amber. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined the voice entirely. Almost. Then I noticed the salt shaker was still missing its cap, nowhere to be found, and in its place, on the kitchen counter, was something I didn't own. A single unwrapped peppermint. Fresh, white and red, and resting on a folded piece of paper with a single sentence written in old-fashioned cursive. "Very good. Next time, use gloves." The peppermint stayed there for hours. I left it untouched, sitting on the folded note, its cheerful swirl of red and white feeling more ominous than anything I'd experienced the night before. I took a picture of it, opened my messages, thought about sending it to my friend Katrina back in Baton Rouge. Something sarcastic, like new apartment rules, obey Candyman or die. But I didn't. Because some instinct, some animal-level part of my brain told me not to involve anyone else. This is personal now, between me and it or them. Whatever left me, Candy wasn't trying to scare me. It was rewarding me, like a teacher marking a paper with a sticker. Gold stars for good behavior. It was almost worse than a threat. I finally slipped the note into a drawer and tossed the peppermint into the trash. Then I scrubbed the counter with bleach and wore gloves when I did it. By day 2, I had convinced myself I could live here. that this whole thing could be manageable. A weird, creepy, southern gothic novel of a place, but livable. Rules were just rules. Louisiana had always been strange. The land remembers more down here. But then came Rule 5, the one about the singing. I had nearly forgotten about it. Had forgotten there even was a full moon that night. Until I found myself lying in bed, trying to fall asleep around 11, and something outside my window began to hum. Faint at first, then clearer, closer. It was a woman's voice, soulful, melodic, wordless. A lullaby made of vapor and night. I sat bolt upright in my bed, pulse hammering, vision fixed on the silhouette outside the window. The blinds were open because I hadn't remembered to close them. And beyond the warped glass, the cypress trees swayed gently, their moss curling like fingers. And standing under them, a figure, not much more than a shape, pale and draped in something that might have been lace or a wedding veil. No features, just the lines of a person traced in fog. The humming shifted, became singing in a language I didn't know or didn't want to. Her voice was beautiful, painfully beautiful. She didn't move, just stood there under the tree, swaying slightly as her song moved from longing to command. A gentle persuasion, the kind of music that makes you cry without knowing why. Her head tilted up. I know you're listening. Soft, almost tender. I know you can open the window. My legs wouldn't move. I haven't spoken in so long, she said. Her tone mournful, hopeful. Please, just open the glass. Let me talk. You're asking questions, but the answers are out here. I nearly stood up, nearly walked to that latch and turned it. But Rule 5 boomed in my memory with surprising force. Do not respond, regardless of what the voice says or how familiar it may seem. And that's when it hit me. Her voice. It had changed. It wasn't foreign anymore. It was Katrina's. Not close. Exact. Every inflection, every lilt, like she was on speakerphone. Remember when we stayed up watching True Blood in college? She murmured. Remember how we said we'd move to a haunted house as long as it had granite countertops? The laugh that followed was pure Katrina. Laughing through her nose, amused at her own joke. Except Katrina lived 80 miles away, and I hadn't spoken to her since the move. You're lonely, the voice cooed. I can feel it from here. Let me in. She raised one hand, not to wave, not to reach, to knock. She knocked on her side of the glass. 3 times. A pause, then again. 2 knocks, then 4, fast and eager. 3. 2, 4. My stomach dropped. Rule 2, Rule 3, Rule 4. Too many rules involved knocks for that to be random. Panic seared up my spine. If I responded, even by mistake, if I answered the wrong number of knocks or opened the window expecting a friend, what would that mean? I forced myself to look away. I covered my ears and shut my eyes and whispered every verse of that old hymn my grandma used to sing on road trips. I'll fly away, oh glory. Over and over, mouth trembling, hands shaking. When I opened my eyes, the window was empty. The blinds were gently swaying, though I'd never touched them. And on the sill, another peppermint, this one wrapped in lace. I turned away and threw up into my trash can. By Wednesday, I started seeing the other tenants. A man in his 60s, walking a grey mutt around dusk. A young woman with headphones cradled in paint-stained hands. A couple in their 40s speaking softly by their front steps, glancing up at my window between sips of something dark and steaming. They always nodded politely. They never made eye contact for long, and none of them offered greetings beyond a tight smile or a short wave. These weren't bad neighbors. They were survivors. I figured out pretty quick that I wasn't in a normal neighborhood. Oak Ridge wasn't about community. It was about endurance. People here didn't live together. They lived beside each other, bound by the unspoken agreement to say nothing and follow the rules. I wanted to ask them about the peppermint, about the knock, about why the dog refused to step onto the grass around the building. But instinct, ever sharp now, warned me. You don't ask questions here. You follow instructions, or you disappear. That's when I started reading back through old rental reviews. Listings long since pulled. Archived websites from property aggregators that you only access through the Wayback Machine. What I found was vague, intentionally so. Short messages left only by people who'd apparently lived in Unit 2B. Compelling apartment, beautiful architecture. Do not break curfew. Stayed 1 month. That's long enough. Bag of salt and cheap bread. Worth the investment. The woman sings on full moons. Don't reply, no matter how lonely you are. Rule 4 saved my life. I still have the peppermint. It wasn't a pattern for surviving anymore. It was a language, a ritual. The building was a cage, and we tenants were the wardens. That night, I reviewed the rules again, this time aloud, reading each with a ritualistic clarity. The apartment didn't creak. The walls didn't groan. Instead, the fireplace exhaled warm air. like something dormant shifting. Rule 2. The fireplace is never to be used. Even if the flue appears functional, do not remove the iron grate. I turned to face it. The rust-dark grate curved like thorned vines. Something about it dared me. I left the lights on all night and didn't approach it. The next morning, a whisper echoed faintly from the crawl space in my closet. I didn't catch the words, but the message was clear. Rule 6 waits, and it's getting impatient. By Thursday night, the apartment began to feel aware. I don't mean haunted, not in the traditional sense. There were no footsteps, moaning pipes, or blood dripping from the ceiling. But something had changed. When I entered a room, I could feel it bracing, like the space adjusted itself, responding to my presence the way a deer tenses when it hears leaves crunch behind it. Not afraid, curiously cautious, and not entirely hostile. That's what made everything worse. It, whatever it is, does not want me dead. Not yet. It wants me trained, conditioned to behave a certain way, respond to its rituals, abide by its laws, and in return, minimal disturbances. The occasional peppermint, a working AC unit, water that runs clear and cold. This place is not punishing, it's grooming. That morning, I found a sheet of paper folded neatly beneath my bathroom towel. Not taped, not wedged, folded, as if whoever or whatever put it there had access to my apartment while I was inside. The paper was blank on one side. The other had 5 words printed in that same typewriter font. Do not skip Friday night. Rule 3. Every Friday at sunset, place 1 teaspoon of salt and 1 slice of white bread on the kitchen windowsill. Dispose of the remains Saturday morning. Use gloves. I didn't need the reminder. I marked the digital clock, laid my phone on the counter, and had the supplies waiting by 5 p.m. As the sun began to set behind the tree line, I placed the white bread slice, lightly toasted for no reason other than instinct, and a teaspoon of fine sea salt onto a paper towel. I folded it neatly and set it on the sill. Then I stepped back and waited. The moment the last sunlight disappeared, the window trembled, just a little, not enough to rattle, just enough to twitch. A shadow passed behind the glass, but outside there was no porch, no walkway, no second floor, just open air overgrown with kudzu and oak branches. I turned the lights low and left the kitchen, closed the bedroom door behind me, slept with gloves on one hand in case I forgot. But I didn't forget. when I opened the bedroom door at 8:06 a.m. and walked back into the kitchen. The paper towel was still there. Sort of. The salt had hardened into an amber-colored crust, and the bread was gone. Entirely. Not eaten, not bitten. Gone, as though it had never truly been bread at all. In its place was a fine, dull gray powder, slightly sticky. I followed instructions, gloves on, paper towel wrapped and tied inside 2 grocery bags. As I took it out the front door, the old man walking his grey mutt passed by again. This time, he stopped and looked toward my unit. "You remembered your bread," he said flatly. I did. He nodded once, smart, and kept walking. No smile, no visible relief, just a distant acknowledgement that I had passed a weekly test I didn't understand. When I came back inside, the apartment smelled faintly like cinnamon toast. Don't ask me why. I hadn't made any. That evening, I stared at the fireplace again. The grate was slightly ajar, not open, not broken, but shifted, like someone's fingers had curled around its edge and tugged. Gently, repeatedly. I knelt in front of it, half holding my breath, and studied the carved iron. Nothing mechanical. It wasn't attached to hinges. It didn't unclasp. And yet, there were smudge prints on the metal. Faint, grease-colored. I didn't touch it, but I did speak. "Why are there rules?" I whispered to the cold fireplace. I didn't expect an answer. I sure as hell didn't expect one to whisper back. But something moved beyond the reach of the chimney. A shift, a dragging sound, like charcoal being pushed across gravel. And then a single word: containment. I flinched back so hard I nearly knocked over the lamp behind me. Contain what? Silence. But the air around the fireplace pulsed with pressure, like the universe was biting its tongue. That night, I set a chair in front of the crawlspace door. A stupid, useless barrier. But I needed the illusion of safety. I didn't sleep. At 2:14 a.m., I woke up to humming. Not the singer in the trees, something lower, closer. The kind of sound you feel in your bones more than hear. Like the inside of a cathedral when no one's speaking. It vibrated through the bed frame, up into my back, and settled behind my eyes. A noise with no origin, not threatening. Just there. I stared at the crawlspace. The humming stopped. That was worse. Then the air changed. Not temperature, density. Like I was breathing something thicker than oxygen, like my lungs were being asked to process something they weren't designed for. I sat up slowly, reached under the bed, pulled out the baseball bat I hadn't touched since college intramurals. I didn't move toward the crawl space. I didn't speak. I just waited, and nothing happened. At 3:01 a.m., My bedroom light flickered 3 times. At 3:03, the vibration stopped. At 3:14, I finally blinked again. At 3:59, before the hour ended, a note slid out from under my closet door. Typed, like before, "You've done well. The others didn't make it this far." Below that, handwritten, "Tomorrow, open the grate. She needs you to see." I didn't sleep after the note. I sat at the kitchen table in the same clothes I'd worn since dinner, a mug of untouched coffee going cold in my hands, watching the light over the fireplace pulse with something less like electricity and more like a heartbeat. It was subtle, but more than shadows. "Tomorrow, open the grate. She needs you to see." The "she" bothered me more than anything. Not it. She. The next morning felt like a funeral wrapped in normalcy. Sunlight came. The floors creaked like normal. A bird landed on the sill and chirped twice, as if offering its approval of the apartment's continued efforts to remain horrifying in subtle, civilized ways. I walked to the fireplace just before noon. The iron grate was hot to the touch. It should not have been hot. I used tongs from the kitchen drawer. Ones I suddenly realized might have been there before I moved in, and gently pried the grate forward. It came loose, without resistance. Behind it, darkness, not blackness, the kind of darkness that feels like it turns inward, velvet and pulling, a depth you keep staring into because you're waiting for it to blink. I slowly angled my phone into the space and turned on the flashlight. The beam disappeared into the dark midair. No reflection, no depth, just void. And then, beneath the hum of unnatural silence, a voice, faint, childlike. "Help!" The sweetness of it destroyed me. Not because it was innocent, but because it wanted to sound that way. Like a siren's practicing inflection. I took a photo inside, even though the flashlight hadn't lit anything. On the preview screen, I saw something looking back. Faint, a face, round eyes, upturned mouth, humanish, but the symmetry was wrong, as if the features were floating slightly apart, separated by intention, not evolution. I didn't scream. I just quietly pushed the grate back into place until the click of it settling home sounded exactly like a coffin lid. Midnight came early that evening. At 7:45 p.m., every light in the apartment went out. By instinct, I walked to the bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the floor, knees to my chest, breathing as quietly as I could. 12 minutes in, someone whispered my name through the keyhole. Not yelled, whispered, breathy and wet. I said nothing. I counted seconds by my pulse. When the bulb above me flickered back to life at precisely 8 p.m., I stood up, washed my hands in silence, and looked in the mirror just once. A message was scrawled across the foggy glass in what looked like soot and something darker. See, she chose you. That night, I slept in the closet, not because it was safer, but because it was smaller. And sometimes, when you live perched on the edge of something monstrous, you convince yourself that being in a tiny room makes you harder to eat. It doesn't, of course. But until the rules change again, it's the only thing keeping me sane. And I just got a new note.